Hello and welcome to our series, How to Prepare for Your Career in Government. I am here with Keith Hassel and I'm Patty Moran. We're from the Center for Career and Professional Development. We have the pleasure of speaking with Megan Chamorro, who is the Human Resource Specialist at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut. Welcome, Megan, to our session.
Good morning.
And we are going to touch base on a few questions that our students and recent alumni may have about how to break into a career in government. What are the differences between applying for and interviewing for and landing a job within that sector versus other industries of interest? As you know, it is a challenging industry to break into, and certainly it requires a lot of boxes to be checked, and we want our students to be prepared as early as their first year as an undergraduate student. So just to get us started, we'd love to learn more about you, Megan. So tell us a little bit about your background, about the organization that you represent.
So I started with the Bureau of Prisons about 8 years ago as a secretary. I have a bachelor's in criminal justice and a master's in public administration. I actually moved to Texas to get a government job because it's not always easy getting one. Getting your foot in the door is really the first step, and then you can move on to other places that you want to go. The Bureau of Prisons is the federal bureau or prison system. We have 120 institutions, 6 regions, a central office, Washington, D.C., and a consolidated human resource area in Grand Prairie, Texas. So we're really all over the place. We staff about 44,000 employees.
Wow.
Incredible. And you mentioned you had to move in order to start your career path. Can you tell us a little bit about that process for you as you were applying for opportunities and considering relocating and then eventually doing so? What was that process like for you?
So when I was finishing up with my bachelor's, I decided to just start looking for federal jobs just because of the benefit, the long-term benefits, the pension, health insurance, job stability, those types of things. I just kind of put my feelers out with different agencies, and the Bureau of Prisons was the first one that had reached out to me. Um, I really never pictured myself working in a prison, so it was a little anxiety provoking.
Mhm.
But when they called me about the secretary job in Texas, I actually interviewed in Danbury, and then they offered it to me, and so I decided to try it. I figured I'd go out there. If I ended up hating it, give it a shot, and I could always come back. But then I ended up really enjoying it, and then I ended up meeting my husband and um, transferring back to Danbury to be closer to family.
Well, it seems like everything has worked out for you, and we commend you for all your successes so far, for sure. The one thing our students are always so curious about are the resumes, right? And as a human resource specialist, I'm sure you've seen plenty of them. Is there a distinction that you find and identify for those who are interested in federal careers that they need to add a bit more details or information on their resumes?
So most federal agencies actually post all their positions on USA Jobs. There's all of our positions are on usajobs.gov. There are agencies that have their own systems. The FBI does, the CIA, Federal Reserve, and a few other random agencies. But I would say 90% post everything on USA Jobs. There's actually a resume builder in USA Jobs. I know for our agency, people do a lot, applicants do a lot better if they use the resume builder in USA Jobs as opposed to using like a Word format and making it fancy. We really just we want to look at experience, education, those types of things. A lot of extra fluff, I like to say, cover pages and stuff like that is not really something that we're looking for as far as my agency.
Thank you.
Excellent. And then, just from your experience, for those of students who might be interested in entering this particular field, how do you think the application process differs from other industries? Do you have any recommendations or tips that the students should be considering?
Be patient. It's a lot longer process than a lot of, even when I worked in the private sector, I would apply for a job a week from then. I'd get a call, I'd interview, and I'd probably start 2 weeks later. Our process just for like a correctional officer from applying could be 6 months depending on the way we have to pull, those are open continuous announcements. If we don't pull a list for 3 months, and then when we work the list, it could be 6 to 8 months before they even get hired. So I think sometimes people get frustrated that, they've applied, they really want the job, they don't want to wait around. But if it's something that they really want to do, if they just wait it out, usually, it will work out in their favor.
That's
That's
great
great advice.
recommendations. Absolutely.
And I know, with it being such a highly competitive field, I know that we always project to our students that networking is key and that it's highly valued in a lot of the job search processes that they'll have. However, I want to hear from your perspective. Do you feel as though networking is a key component in applying for opportunities within this sector?
I would say yes and no. I would more lean towards no, just because the way you have to apply, and like for our agency, once you apply, your name and your resume and all your information goes to a consolidated staffing unit. They're the ones that review your resume. So if you apply to FCI Danbury, your resume is not going to come to Megan Chamorro, HR specialist. It's going to go to John Smith, HR specialist in Grand Prairie. So even if you met me at a job fair, I might not review your stuff and maybe never even see it, depending on what John Smith says, whether you're best qualified or not.
That's interesting that the fact that it goes to a consolidated staffing unit. I'm wondering then if a candidate applies for an open position and they don't get that position, do they stay in the bank? And does that staffing unit, recycle that applicant for other opportunities that they may not have applied for?
I mean, it depends. We have positions that are considered like open continuous, which are like correctional officers. Those are ones that are open for a year. It's kind of like a bucket. And when we pull, say we have 10 vacancies, we can tell Grand Prairie, hey, we have 10 vacancies. We need 35 names from our bucket, but there could be 80 names in the bucket. So you could not get pulled that time, but the next time you could get pulled. Individual positions for like a drug treatment specialist or a teacher or a secretary or a nurse, those types of positions, they would have to keep reapplying once they were open, because they're not open the same way. And other agencies are the same way, that they have either open continuous for like a 12-month announcement, or it's just open for like 5 days or 15 days.
That's good. Yeah.
In regards to, obviously in your role, you look at a lot of resumes, you have your own resume, etc. What are some things that you particularly look for, or maybe recommendations that you would have for current students to maybe activities that they should be performing, or what are certain things that you look for on a resume that would make someone more marketable?
I just think to really like sell yourself and give yourself credit for everything that you've done. Because I know, at least for our agency, a lot of people, like if you're applying to a secretary, I even know when I was first applying, I just put basic stuff that I did at my previous employer. But you just make an assumption that so-and-so that's reading your resume knows what you did as a secretary somewhere else. But I really don't know what you do. Some secretaries book all travel for their exec, and some secretaries only answer phones and schedule the meetings. Some secretaries do a ton of other duties. So you need to make sure that you're putting in there and giving yourself credit for everything that you have experience in doing.
Great, thank you.
Great advice. And Megan, you mentioned before the lifeline of a job. You said between 5 to 15 days positions can be posted. I want our students to be aware of how quick opportunities can come and go within this field. Do you find that there's an average time, a lifespan of a live application online, or do you feel like it's erratic based on the positions?
It's really based on the positions. My suggestion would be for anybody that's interested in a federal government job to create an account on USA Jobs. They can figure out what job series they're most interested in. Like human resource management is 0201. So I have a filter set up on USA Jobs that anytime an 0201 job posts within 50 miles of here, I get an email that says, hey, the Department of Labor is hiring an HR specialist in Hartford. It's open from this date to this day. So that it's kind of like, I think there's other job sites like Indeed and some of these others where you can set up notifications. It's the same thing with federal positions. You can decide what job series you're interested in, and then every agency, because there's agencies I didn't even know existed. And they're emailing me and they're saying, oh, there's a position with this agency. And I was like, what? I don't even, so, and I think that people shouldn't limit themselves to like, they want to work for the FBI. Well, getting a job with the FBI isn't always the easiest. But you could start with the Bureau of Prisons or start with another agency. And once you're in the federal government, there are a lot of positions that are only open to other federal employees. So it can open a lot of doors once you get your foot in. So you don't exactly have to start exactly where you want to end up. It's just, getting started.
That's tremendous advice integrated into that answer. So I appreciate that. And so yes, students, just note that they're pretty transparent with their job descriptions in comparison to other sectors. So oftentimes you will have notification if the applications will close on a specific date. They'll even make mention, it closed on this date unless, they receive a certain amount of applications. So it's great in the sense that it's very black and white at times. So I appreciate you filling in the blanks there. So, let's transition over to the interview process. Do you feel as though that process is different in any capacity? Are there any pieces of advice that you would give to our students on how it's structured?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty standard based on, here we do panel interviews for every position. It doesn't matter what position you're doing. It's usually with HR and the department head. It used to be with a psychologist. We actually replaced that component with a standardized test. There are agencies that, like us, like you have to pass the core values assessment before you even interview. But we let you know ahead of time, like it's not a surprise. We tell you, there's the standardized test. They have to integrity test before you're even able to interview. So people are aware. It just takes a lot of time. Like people end up being here for a couple, 3 to 4 hours, which in my experience in the private sector was not, 45 minutes, you're in, you wait a little while, you interview, and then you leave. And I know a lot of other agencies do multiple interviews.
And Megan, you mentioned the core values assessment. Can you share any more information on that?
So it's basically like a situational test, and it's kind of like they give you a scenario, and then you have to say what you would and what you wouldn't do in a situation. Because we work at a prison, integrity is a big thing. We're considered law enforcement, so it's just an important aspect of the interview process for us. Not every agency has that.
Thank you for that.
And you touched a little bit about, having patience and, definitely resiliency when you're applying for these different positions. But what do you think, if you could sum it up, what is the biggest piece of advice you would have for someone who is potentially entering into a federal career?
I would just say to be open to different positions, different agencies. Like I said, I never expected to work in a prison. I even planned to get my foot in the door and go work for another agency, but I've really enjoyed it. It's been good to me. I don't think I'll ever go anywhere else. I just think that if you narrow yourself to one specific place, it's going to be difficult, and you're going to find a lot of roadblocks. And also, as far as like the scales, we use the general schedule for GS scales. So when you're applying to positions right out of school, you want to look for positions that are lower grades. Getting into a GS-12 or a GS-13 right out of school is going to be very rare. But if you do career ladder positions that start at a 7 and go up to a 12, you'll eventually get there. You're just going to have to start at an entry level.
That's great. And that truly is a great message. And I think for anyone studying any industry, it's the fact of, just you never know where ultimately your path can lead. And I love the fact that, Megan, when you mentioned, you had no idea that you were going to end up in the Bureau of Prisons, and now you can't see yourself anywhere else. And sometimes it's about the journey. So that's, prime example yourself. That's excellent. Thank you.
And are those levels, those lower grade levels that you mentioned, are they, transparent on the job applications, or do candidates have to dig a bit to figure out the levels?
No, it's right there, and you can actually filter out and search for, say, GS7. GS7 is 5, 7, and 9 is probably most entry-level positions are those levels. And then it will tell you what the promotional potential is at 11, a 12. Some of them, the promotional potential is a 7. It doesn't go any higher than 7. That doesn't mean you'll stay at a 7 once you're in an agency and you're working there. They're going to have other positions that are higher graded positions that you can then apply to.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And I want to end it with talking a little bit about your recruitment needs, if you have any at FCI, whether it be at the undergraduate level for students to either intern or volunteer or shadow, all the way up into full-time opportunities. Are you recruiting currently for any opportunities, or would you like to promote anything that you may be recruiting for in the future?
So we're always recruiting for medical positions. It's a very difficult department for us to staff for a lot of different reasons. Again, because I think a lot of people picture prison, they're watching movies or locked up and that's how they picture it to be. It's not like here, at least, it's not like that at all. So it is difficult for us to hire, especially nurses. We're always looking for nurses. We do hire nurses right out of school without any experience, which I know, some nurses have difficulty getting into hospitals and stuff without any experience. Correctional officers we're always looking for. Our psychology department is always looking for drug treatment specialists. We have a couple separate, we have a special treatment program for female inmates and skills inmates, which are lower IQ or inmates with traumatic brain injuries. Our education department is always, we have teachers, education specialists, ed techs, those types of things. So we're really always looking, and all our jobs are always posted on USA Jobs.
Excellent. That's great. Well, we appreciate your time today. Keith, is there any other questions that are?
No, I don't think so. But again, Megan, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your insight, and especially the roles that might be available with your organization. But I certainly learned a lot myself, and I know there's going to be a lot of takeaways for our students as well.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for your time. And on behalf of Sacred Heart University at large, we look forward to continuing to work with you and working with FCI Danbury.
And if you have anybody that's interested or has any questions, you can give them my email and information, and I can answer any questions that they have.
Perfect. We'll do that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks again.